In agency design work, changes and revisions are part of the daily reality. How an AI workflow responds to the change of direction tells you whether it will hold up in real production work. And in an agency context, this is not about design quality. It's about collaboration, timelines and rework, and whether a process actually can be reused. When we talk about change in agency work, we are usually not talking about big pivots. Most of the time it starts small. You want to adjust something, refine a detail or a slight change of direction without breaking everything else. Change in agency work doesn't show up in just one way. Sometimes it's you revising your own work. Another time it's your colleague trying to adapt the work to fit a shared direction.
Almost there. Just a few tweaks left.
And sometimes it's the organization reusing the whole workflow to fit a new client or a new project.
I really hope this workflow will adapt successfully.
And these feels like completely different situations, but they're all testing the same thing, how a workflow handles change. So let's look at how change behaves on 3 different levels: the individual level, the team level, and on the organizational level. We start with the individual level. Let's say that you're working on a design. You feel good with the first version, but then you come back later and you see that, okay, I'm close, but something is a little bit off. Just need to adjust the tone a bit or refine some detail, tweak the layout. And this is the most basic change in design work. Just a simple revision. In a prompt-centric workflow, change usually means that you are modifying the instruction. Even with the modern tools where you have references, you have masking and partial edits, all the decisions that matter are bundled together. So tone, constraints, style, and composition, they all live inside of the same instruction. So when you're changing one part of the prompt, you're not just changing one thing. You're reshaping the instruction that produced the result. And sometimes that works. But sometimes it introduces changes that you didn't ask for. This is usually where people say, I just wanted to tweak this thing, why did everything else suddenly change? At this point, a revision stops being a refinement. You are generating new outputs and then you're comparing those outputs, managing risk instead of making a controlled change. In system-based workflows, change behaves differently. Decisions are separated and there is a structure that lives outside of the prompts. This makes local change possible. You can adjust one part without destabilizing everything else. And this makes a revision become a refinement again. And this is not because the tools are smarter, it's because the workflow is designed to handle change. Now let's move beyond one individual. Agency work rarely stays with one person. Sometimes your colleagues need to pick up your work and continue, and sometimes you have 2 designers that work on different parts of the same project that still needs to fit the same direction. This is where change becomes collaborative. So looking at prompt-centric workflows, the logic usually lives in 2 places. It's inside the prompts, and inside the head of the person who wrote the prompts. Even if the team is sharing their prompts with each other, what they are sharing is usually a history of trial and error. It's long prompt logs, it's small tweaks, and things that maybe worked once. What is missing here is the clarity. It's really hard to know which decisions are deliberate, which constraints in the prompts actually mattered, and which part of the final result that was just a happy accident. This is often where teams say, it works, but only as long as it's the same person running it. When intent isn't clear, the colleagues have to guess what is safe to change, and every change becomes a risk. In system-based workflows, logic is externalized. Decisions are visible and dependencies are clearer. This means that someone else can open the project, understand how your workflow is put together, and make changes safely. The changes are no longer tied to one person's mental model. It becomes transferable. And this is the difference between collaboration based on intuition and collaboration based on a shared understanding. Now let's talk about scale. This is where change stops being about a single design and starts affecting how you work across the agency. A normal agency situation looks like this. You create a workflow for a client, and it works, and it produces good results. Then instead of starting from scratch for the next project, you reuse the workflow again. It might be for a new client, a new project, or a new context. In a prompt-centric workflow, scaling usually means copying what worked. So you copy the prompts, and then you adjust the instructions for that new project. But this means that over time, differences are starting to pile up. Someone adjusts a prompt in one way, another one in a slightly different way, and someone finds a workaround that only works once. So there is no single place where the decisions behind the workflow live anymore. This is where agencies often say, we're definitely faster than before, but it's getting harder to stay consistent. Control means consistency. It means being able to reuse your decisions and predict what will happen when you make a change. Prompt-centric workflows help you to produce more results. But when moving to a new client, you have to redo most of the thinking, most of the adjustments and the trial and error that led to those results. So scaling doesn't mean that you are repeating the process. Scaling in this case means that you are redoing parts of this over and over again. In system-based workflows, scaling works differently. You're not copying instructions, but you're reusing the structure. The core process stays the same, but you can change the variables. You can swap the brand rules, you can adjust the constraints, and you can change the inputs, but you're not rebuilding the process each time. This means that when you're changing something, you can anticipate the effect. You know what will change and what will stay the same. You're using the same decisions and the same process, just applying it to a new project or a new client. So let's look at what all this means. Across all three levels we have talked about today, individual, team, and organizational level, the pattern has been the same. Change is not a problem, but it reveals how a workflow was built. Prompt-centric workflows assume stability, so they react to change. System-based workflows assume change because they were designed for it. So whether you're revising, collaborating, or scaling, these two workflows will behave differently. So once you have seen how change behaves inside of a workflow, the next question becomes unavoidable. If structure determines how change plays out, what actually makes something a system? That's what we will look at in the next video.